Since the 18th century, the United Kingdom is one of the world's greatest tea consumers per capita, with an average per capita tea supply of 1.9 kilograms per year. The popularity of tea occasioned the furtive export of slips, a small shoot for planting or twig for grafting to tea plants, from China to British India and its commercial culture there, beginning in 1840. British interests controlled tea production in the subcontinent. Tea, which was an upper-class drink in Europe, became the infusion of every class in Great Britain in the course of the 18th century and has remained so. In Britain, the drinking of tea is so varied that it is quite hard to generalise. While it is usually served with milk, it is not uncommon to drink it black or with lemon, with sugar being a popular addition to any of the above. Strong tea served with milk in a mug is commonly referred to as builder's tea. History. The first record of tea written in English came from English merchants abroad. In 1615, Richard Wickham, who ran an East India Company office in Japan, wrote in a letter to merchants in Macau requesting that they bring him a pot of the best sort of chaw. Peter Mundy, a traveller and merchant who came across tea in Fujian, China in 1637, wrote, only water with a kind of herb boiled in it. Green tea exported from China was first introduced in the coffeehouses of London shortly before the Stuart Restoration. In 1657, tea was offered as an item in a London coffeehouse in Exchange Alley, London. The owner Thomas Garraway had to explain the new beverage in pamphlet and an advertisement in Mercurius Politicus for September 30, 1658 offered that excellent, and by all physicians approved, China drink, called by the Chinese, cha, by other nations tea alias tea. Sold at the Sultan's Head, Ye Coffee House in Sweeting's Rents, by the Royal Exchange, London. In London coffee, chocolate and a kind of drink called tea were sold in almost every street in 1659, according to Thomas Rugg's Diurnal. Tea was mainly consumed by upper and mercantile classes. Samuel Pepys, curious for every novelty, tasted the new drink in 1660 and recorded the experience in his diary. September 25 I did send for a cup of tea, of which I had never had drunk before. That same year, £2, 2 ounces of tea bought from Portugal were formally presented to Charles II by the British East India Company. Some years later, in 1667, Pepys noted that his wife was taking tea on medical advice, a drink which Mr. Pelling the apothecary tells her is good for her colds and affluxions. The Royal College of Physicians debated whether any of the exotic new hot drinks would agree with the constitutions of our English bodies. In 1662 Princess Catherine of Braganza of Portugal married Charles II and brought with her the preference for tea, which had already become common in Europe. As tea was her temperance drink of choice, it gained social acceptance among the aristocracy. Catherine of Braganza's choice of tea was also instrumental in the popularization of tea in Britain. Because tea was introduced primarily through male-frequented coffee houses, there would have been far less social acceptability for women to drink this beverage had it not been for her example. Catherine of Braganza's use of tea as a court beverage, rather than a medicinal drink, influenced its popularity in literary circles around 1685. The British East India Company made its first order for the importation of tea in 1667 to their agent in Bantam, and 2 canisters of tea weighing 143 pounds 8 ounces arrived from Bantam in 1669. In 1672, a servant of Baron Herbert in London sent his instructions for tea making, and warming the delicate cups, to Shropshire. The directions for the tea are, a quart of spring water just boiled, to which put a spoonful of tea, and sweeten to the palate with candy sugar. As soon as the tea and sugar are in, the steam must be kept in as much as may be, and let it lie half or quarter of an hour in the heat of the fire but not boil. The little cups must be held over the steam before the liquid be put in. Black tea overtook green tea in popularity in the 1720s when sugar and milk were added to tea, a practice that was not done in China. The growth in the import of tea parallels that of sugar in the 18th century. Between 1720 and 1750 the imports of tea to Britain through the British East India Company more than quadrupled. Fernand Braudel queried, "Is it true to say the new drink replaced gin in England?" By 1766, exports from Canton stood at £6 million on British boats, compared with 4.5 on Dutch ships, 2.4 on Swedish, 2.1 on French. Veritable tea fleets grew up. Tea was particularly interesting to the Atlantic world not only because it was easy to cultivate but also because of how easy it was to prepare and its ability to revive the spirits and cure mild colds. Home, and there find my wife making of tea, Pepys recorded under June 28, 1667, a drink which Mr. Pelling the apothecary tells her is good for her colds and effluxions. The earliest English equipages for making tea date to the 1660s. Small porcelain tea bowls were used by the fashionable. They were occasionally shipped with the tea itself. Tea drinking spurred the search for a European imitation of Chinese porcelain, first successfully produced in England at the Chelsea Porcelain Manufactory, established around 1743-45 and quickly imitated. Between 1872 and 1884 the supply of tea to the British Empire increased with the expansion of the railway to the east. The demand however was not proportional, which caused the prices to rise. Nevertheless, from 1884 onward due to new innovation in tea preparation the price of tea dropped and remained relatively low throughout the first half of the 20th century. Soon afterwards London became the centre of the international tea trade. With high tea imports also came a large increase in the demand for porcelain. The demand for teacups, pots and dishes increased to go along with this popular new drink. Now, people in Britain drink tea multiple times a day. As the years passed it became a drink less associated with high society as people of all classes drink tea today which can be enjoyed in many different flavours and ways. British-style tea. Even very slightly formal events can be a cause for cups and saucers to be used instead of mugs. A typical semi-formal British tea ritual might run as follows: the kettle is brought to a rolling boil. Enough boiling water is swirled around the teapot to warm it and then poured out. Add loose tea leaves, or tea bags, always added before the boiled water. Fresh boiling water is poured over the tea in the pot and allowed to brew for 2 to 5 minutes while a tea cosy may be placed on the pot to keep the tea warm. Milk must be added to the teacup, the host asking the guest if milk is wanted. Milk may never be added after the tea is poured. A tea strainer is placed over the top of the cup and the tea poured in, unless tea bags are used. Tea bags may be removed, if desired, once desired strength is attained. Fresh milk and white sugar is added according to individual taste. Most people have milk with their tea, many without sugar. The pot will normally hold enough tea so as not to be empty after filling the cups of all the guests. If this is the case, the tea cosy is replaced after everyone has been served. Hot water may be provided in a separate pot, and is used only for topping up the pot, never the cup. Whether to put milk into the cup before or after the tea has been a matter of debate since at least the mid-20th century. In his 1946 essay A Nice Cup of Tea, author George Orwell wrote, "Tea is one of the mainstays of civilization in this country and causes violent disputes over how it should be made. Whether to put tea in the cup first and add the milk after, or the other way around, has split public opinion, with Orwell stating, indeed in every family in Britain there are probably two schools of thought on the subject." Another aspect of the debate are claims that adding milk at the different times alters the flavor of the tea. Some studies suggest that the heating of milk above 75 degrees Celsius does cause denaturation of the lactalbumin and lactoglobulin. Other studies argue brewing time has a greater importance. Regardless, when milk is added to tea, it may affect the flavor. In addition to considerations of flavor, the order of these steps is thought to have been, historically, an indication of class. Only those wealthy enough to afford good quality porcelain would be confident of its being able to cope with being exposed to boiling water unadulterated with milk. There is also a proper manner in which to drink tea when using a cup and saucer. If one is seated at a table, the proper manner to drink tea is to raise the teacup only, placing it back into the saucer in between sips. When standing or sitting in a chair without a table, one holds the tea saucer with the offhand and the teacup in the dominant hand. When not in use, the teacup is placed back in the tea saucer and held in one's lap or at waist height. In either event, The teacup should never be held or waved in the air. Fingers should be curled inwards, no finger should extend away from the handle of the cup. Tea as a meal. Tea is not only the name of the beverage, but of a late afternoon light meal at 4 o'clock, irrespective of the beverage consumed. Anna Russell, Duchess of Bedford, is credited with the creation of the meal circa 1800. She thought of the idea to ward off hunger between luncheon and dinner, which was served later and later. The tradition continues to this day. Tea is often accompanied with a light snack, such as biscuits, and it was the emergence of afternoon tea that saw Britain regard biscuits as something dunked in tea. A British custom that was exported around the globe. McVitie's biscuits are the most popular biscuits in the UK to dunk in tea, with McVitie's chocolate digestives, rich tea and hobnobs ranked the nation's top 3 favourite biscuits in 2009. There is a tradition of tea rooms in the UK which provide the traditional fare of cream and jam on scones, a combination commonly known as cream tea. While these establishments have declined in popularity since World War II, there are still many tea rooms to be found in the countryside. In Devon and Cornwall particularly, cream teas are a speciality. ABC tea shops and Leon Corner houses were a successful chain of such establishments. In Yorkshire, the company Betty's and Taylors of Harrogate run their own tea rooms. Betty's Cafe Copyright Tea Rooms, established in 1919, is now classed as a British institution. Industrial Revolution. Some scholars suggest that tea played a role in British Industrial Revolution. Afternoon tea possibly became a way to increase the number of hours labourers could work in factories. The stimulants in the tea, accompanied by sugary snacks, would give workers energy to finish out the day's work. Further, tea helped alleviate some of the consequences of the urbanisation that accompanied the Industrial Revolution. Drinking tea required boiling the water, thereby killing waterborne diseases like dysentery, cholera, and typhoid. Tea cards. In the United Kingdom, a number of varieties of loose tea sold in packets from the 1940s to the 1980s contain tea cards. These were illustrated cards roughly the same size as cigarette cards and intended to be collected by children. Perhaps the best known were Typhoo Tea and Brooke Bond, the latter of whom also provided albums for collectors to keep their cards in. Some renowned artists were commissioned to illustrate the cards, including Charles Tunnicliffe. Many of these card collections are now valuable collector's items. A related phenomenon arose in the early 1990s when PG Tips released a series of tea-based pogs, with pictures of cups of tea and chimpanzees on them. Tiddly's Tea released competing pogs but never matched the popularity of the PG Tips variety. Tea Today, in 2003, Data Monitor reported that regular tea drinking in the United Kingdom was on the decline. There was a 10.25% decline in the purchase of normal tea bags in Britain between 1997 and 2002. Sales of ground coffee also fell during the same period. Britons were instead drinking health-oriented beverages like fruit and or herbal teas, consumption of which increased 50% from 1997 to 2002. A further, unexpected, statistic is that the sales of decaffeinated tea and coffee fell even faster during this period than the sale of the more common varieties. Declining tea sales were matched by an increase in espresso sales. See also, A Nice Cup of Tea, Brown Betty, an iconic type of teapot made from British red clay, known for being rotund and glazed with brown manganese. Cube teapot, a heavy-duty type of teapot invented for making tea on ships. Earl Grey tea, a classic English blended tea, flavoured with bergamot citrus oil. English breakfast tea, Gunfire, a cocktail made of tea and rum served in the British Army. List of tea companies. United Kingdom, London Tea Auction, Prince of Wales Tea Blend, Rich Tea, an early form of tea biscuit, created as a light between meal snack. To be served with tea, tea cake, tea sandwich, tea is made, an English appliance that combines a kettle and a teapot to make tea automatically by alarm clock. TV pickup, a daily spike in power consumption in the UK due to the use of electric kettles. References. Further reading.